All right, hello everybody. Hi. Cool. Well, first I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's my first time in Portugal, and to Lisbon, of course. I've been really enjoying my time here so far, so thank you for SINFO for inviting me and for putting on this awesome event. My name is Tahir Hasandjekic, better known as Tashi. I work at 343 Industries, working on Halo and Esports specifically. Today I want to talk about engineering and programming and computer science and how a lot of people who work in that field are kind of the unsung heroes in esports. And what I'm hoping to come out of this presentation with is, inspiring everyone to, get involved in esports, because I think it's a really exciting new industry. It's continuing to grow, and there's a lot of ways that engineers can drive a significant impact, despite what you might see on social media. So, speaking of that, if you're following social media, it seems like there's some prerequisites to getting involved in esports and having a big impact. So, first one is, being a pro player. Of course, pros have a huge impact, right? They're the kind of stars of the show. They play the game. They're having an impact on and off the screen. No doubt about that. Same with team owners or CEOs, right? They're becoming more and more popular and more to the forefront of esports, making big deals, signing big rosters, expanding into new games. They're obviously having a huge impact in esports as well. Next is working at a big company. So this is my path and myself. I work on Halo at Microsoft, massive organization. So this is, again, just one way that someone can get involved in esports. Next is there's kind of perception that you need to have a big following on social media, right? If you've got a blue check mark and 1 million followers, you're kind of a big dog, right? So, and no doubt, there are people who are on social media with big followings that are kind of controlling the conversation, influencing people, and having a big impact in various esports games. Along the same lines, being a popular Twitch streamer or YouTuber, right? So definitely a lot of people in those space who are, driving the industry forward and, helping expand esports. And lastly, working in production. So this is like being a broadcast talent, being on camera, things like that, being a director of a show, really like a creative. So again, these are all people in these areas that are definitely having a big impact in esports. But I feel like the perception is you need to be in one of these 6 categories to have an impact. And what I want to talk about today is how there's way more to the story of esports and driving impact, and how I think engineers are really the unsung heroes in the esports industry. And my kind of hope to you all is you don't have to be one of these people or fit into these buckets to have an impact. So today, overall, I want to share my path for getting into esports. I think I had a pretty untraditional path, so I want to talk a bit more about that. I also want to showcase some engineers who have had an impact in esports and tell a bit more about their story and what they're working in, and hopefully that'll inspire some of you as well. And then, I want to touch on at the end, what are some good starting places if you would like to get involved in esports, but you're not exactly sure how to jump in. And yes, in case you're wondering, that photo was taken just a few hours ago. Okay, so talk a little bit about myself. I was born in a small town in New York called Mahopac. There's about 2,000 to 3,000 people who live there. It's a very small town. It's actually called a hamlet, because it's basically like a little island surrounded by a bigger town. So we had, a very small school system. Wasn't a lot of networking opportunities there. But I've been playing games since I was a little kid, right? So I used to visit my grandfather's house, and my uncle used to have a room in the basement where he had an original Nintendo, and I used to go there and just play Mario and Zelda all day, and that was my big passion, how I got into gaming. As time went on, though, I found I was really drawn to art. I thought I was going to become an artist. All I did was draw Dragon Ball Z or comics or whatever it might be, Ninja Turtles. I was just completely obsessed with art, and my whole family is pretty artistic too, so I thought this was my path, I'm going to become an artist. That kind of led me to dabbling a bit in engineering. When I was a teenager, I wanted to basically create this kind of gaming experience around Dragon Ball Z. So I made this really dinky, like, turn-based RPG where you basically signed up to be one of the characters from Dragon Ball Z on this website that I made, and I coded in HTML. And I didn't know anything about coding then, and I was just like, hey, I want to do this thing. Let me go figure out how to do it. And it was on angelfire.com was the website that hosted it. It only gave you 20 megabytes to basically build an entire website. And I was just super obsessed with it, and I built this game, and I think for me that kind of led me to getting more and more interested in engineering. And really, my perspective on art and what I wanted to do totally changed from then on when I first played Halo. So I was about 15, 16 years old. This is 2003, so a couple of years after Halo had originally come out. And I was just completely, not only blown away by the whole experience, but I was completely hooked and like sucked in 100%. And I knew from then on, hey, I'm going to work on Halo. Like, I knew in that moment, that's what I wanted to do, and I had my, eyes set on that. It was in engineering, as I mentioned. I ended up going to school at Rochester Institute of Technology. This is in upstate New York. That's a picture of the university there. They call it Brick City because it's, as you can see, all bricks. But that didn't work out too well. Family hit some financial trouble around that time. I had to drop out after about a year and a half. So, my dreams of becoming an engineer on Halo were starting to dwindle. But I didn't give up hope. So in 2014, I finally joined the team at 343 and began working on Halo. I was on the community team at the time, and this was just before the Halo Esports program was starting. And I got to help launch the Halo Championship Series with the awesome community team there, and little by little, the whole program has been built out over time. And now, today, my role, I'm the Esports and Viewership lead, so I oversee the Esports program and the team there who makes the HCS and runs the league. And I oversee now our broader viewership for the Halo franchise as well. And even after all this, I'm not in an engineering role. I'm still passionate about it and the potential of it. Not only in gaming, but more specifically in esports and what it can do. So one thing I really want to also get across is like esports is such a diverse industry. There are so many different kind of disciplines and skills that can be applied to esports. Not only in engineering, but other fields as well. So you have broadcast production. Of course, this is running shows, showcasing the awesome tournaments around the world that take place both online and in person. This tournament management, so all the platforms that are created where tournaments are run, how brackets are run, all of that is its own kind of area. Content, social media, and viewership. Of course, people need to watch the tournaments, so that's a huge area that is growing and bustling in esports and a big part of it. Player and team performance as well. This is one where I think engineers are starting to make more headway in as teams are trying to, hey, how can we win more, right? So they're diving into analytics, leveraging APIs, things like that, to learn more about the team's performance and how they can improve and also discover new talent. So that's a really interesting field as well. Next one is obviously huge, game development, right? So can't have an esport without a game to play. So game development and working on that side of things. Obviously, there's tons of different disciplines and people that work on games, and competitive and esports is a growing and continues to grow part of game development. And then lastly, business and partnerships, right? So this is another important part of esports. It's what builds an entire ecosystem, pulls everyone together. You talk about teams, franchises, things like that. So as you can see, like, there's a lot going on in esports. There's a lot of different ways to get in, not only as an engineer, but other areas as well. So more specifically, I want to jump into broadcast production a bit, and you can see this picture is from our most recent event in Raleigh, and some of our talent are just, I guess, showing off their stomach, but just having a little fun there. So in terms of innovation, broadcast production is seeing constant innovation. Just a few examples. This is really the tip of the iceberg. I think broadcast is one of the areas that engineering is seeing a lot of impact in. So OBS, Open Broadcast Software, this is a total open source piece of broadcasting software that has really reduced the barrier to entry to people running high quality tournaments. And people are making their own plugins and evolving that platform entirely. So OBS, I think, is super interesting. Elgato Stream Deck has also been changing waves in the esports industry. For those who are unaware, it's just a little piece of hardware where you plug it into your PC through a USB, and it has totally programmable buttons. And so people are programming those buttons to do all kinds of amazing things for broadcast. Expression graphics is another one that I wanted to call out. So you would think looking at graphics on screen for a tournament, it's only artists that got to work in that. But all of that is being powered from software from the back end. There's graphics producers inputting data, changing the graphics, making sure they sequence on time in different steps of the show. So, again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much here that I've not mentioned, and honestly, we wouldn't have enough time today to go over everything in there. And so what's the impact, right? So overall, this is lowering the barrier to entry to run esports broadcasts. You talk about anyone being able to run their own esports broadcast from their, apartment, really, and home. If you look at what happened with the pandemic and how we weren't able to have live events for the last couple of years, the innovation in software here was critical. Like, it's the only way that all of this survived. You talk about how an entire production crew had to go from working together in one area to now you have the audio engineer, for example, working out of his or her bedroom. Like, software is the thing that pulls that all together, and esports has seen a ton of innovation there, and really what I feel like has kind of led the broadcasting space, not only in gaming but all up. And then lastly, impact is just increasing production value for not only low budget broadcasts but high budget ones as well. So, again, what's been amazing with all this software innovation is that anyone can really run their own broadcast, and when you turn it on, it doesn't necessarily look like, oh, there's not really a budget behind this. Like, actually, this looks like a really legitimate esports broadcast that's entertaining to watch, and lo and behold, there's probably a really small crew behind it, and they're doing it out of passion. So software is kind of what's driving and innovating there, which is really exciting. So I also want to showcase some of these unsung heroes in the industry. This is Bob Bruinekool. So he works at DreamHack. He's the head of broadcast tech there. He studied at Delft University, mechanical engineering and biomedical engineering. His first engineering job and his path to DreamHack was super interesting. So he didn't have a traditional path or job that he got in engineering. He started his own broadcast production company with his brother. And they got kind of, a lot of gigs and a lot of notoriety in Europe running different events. And they were later kind of hired onto DreamHack to help run kind of huge, massive, really like stadium events. Favorite esport is StarCraft 2. So shout out to StarCraft. I'm a huge StarCraft fan as well. Hopefully Bob plays Terran, but I actually don't know which. And then I asked them, what in your role are you most passionate about? And so Bob said, designing, creating solutions for complex problems, as well as teaching others to learn and solve problems with a highly generalized skill set and thinking. Bob and I chatted a bit more about this, but there's such a huge opportunity to be creative with engineering, where you typically would think that it's only left for artists per se, but you talk about this really complex web of problems and people and pieces of a puzzle. Engineers and software is a good way to kind of innovate and be creative to find awesome solutions. I also had to ask what Bob's favorite food was. He said Neapolitan-style pizza, especially when self-made. I haven't had any of Bob's pizza, but I'm looking forward to it one day. So I also asked, Bob, what were a couple projects that you worked on that you wanted to talk about? So first one is game data-driven LED states and statistics. So for Dota 2 Dream League, which is pictured at the top right there, he says, I've created middleware programs primarily using Node.js to collect data from the game's API and combat log and use this to drive both LED screens with contextual information and states. So what he's talking about there is, let's say in the game one of the heroes dies. On stage, you'll see different graphics fired off and being represented off of what's happening in the game. So Bob is one of the people that created this middleware software to drive all of that. And so, that's having a big impact in terms of the overall production value and the entertainment value that this show provides. He also talks about how this also fed the stats pages that the observers use. So in Dota, you'll see a lot of times when you're watching, there's this interesting stat that flies on screen. Where does that data come from? Well, that's Bob kind of making all that and driving that for the show. Next, he talked about this Raspberry Pi-driven talk and mute system. So this is, again, behind-the-scenes type stuff for all the broadcast production. He talks about to make communications easier between producers and on-screen talent easier, I built a series of boxes with Raspberry Pis inside them that send OSC network messages to sound desks to move faders and activate talkback settings and so on. So, this is hugely important for the broadcast talent and the producers on the show. How are they communicating? How is this all managed on screen? And, Bob used his creativity, his ingenuity, and his skills as an engineer to have this really elegant solution. And again, this is smoother production for everybody involved, entertainment value for the audience. This is a real impact that Bob was able to drive. But again, Bob doesn't have 1 million followers on social media, so it largely goes kind of unrecognized. Next is tournament management. So there's innovation happening here on the large scale and a small scale. So in-game integration is continuing to grow. Tournaments being run in-game entirely. Automated tournament operation as well from outside platforms. Anti-cheat and really security all up. There's going to be constant innovation here in this space for years to come. And then, open platforms for community events, right? So how do you create a platform that allows specific communities or individuals to run their own events on that platform? So impact here is massive, right? Talk about anyone in the world being able to run their own tournament for free and potentially create a business off of that as well. That grassroots movement is what helps drive local communities and helps them, get up to a larger scale to be recognized in official leagues and things like that. When it comes to anti-cheat, the impact there is fair and competitive tournaments. This is foundational to esports, right? You can't have an esport if it's not fair and competitive. So, driving things with anti-cheat and the software solutions there are massive. This is for online and in-person events as well. And for some of these platforms, right, this is thousands of teams and players competing at the same time on this platform, millions of dollars in prize pool on the line. The risks are so great. And so software and the innovators there are really driving these solutions. And again, I think our unsung heroes, which leads us to our next person, which is Lulu. So full name is Maria Laura Scuri. Lulu works at Faceit. She's the director of data there. She went to school at Bocconi University in Italy. First engineering job was assistant researcher at her university, and her favorite game is League of Legends. So, again, people coming from all different games and passions. You don't have to be just focused on one game or one thing. I asked her, what in your role are you most passionate about? She says, there are two main aspects about my role I love. First is our players. I love their reactions when a new tool is released. Second is mentoring and teaching younger people to get onboarded onto the team. So, love seeing the passion here, especially when it comes to, right, you talk about the players, those are customers, right, for Faceit and the platform. Their reaction and seeing the impact directly is super exciting. Favorite food? Well, she says I'm Italian, so you can easily win me off with a nice bowl of good pasta. I'm right there with you, Lulu. So I asked Lulu about some of the projects that she works on, and super interesting stuff here. So she says, I've been working on a number of different projects, from our anti-cheat to Minerva, our anti-toxicity engine. Anti-cheat helps detect people that are using software and gives them unfair advantage, of course. Minerva is, right, it's more new. So anti-toxicity made of different machine learning products that allow to detect voice and messages that are either racist, toxic, or abusive. Pretty incredible solutions here that Lulu and team are driving and Faceit team is driving in esports, right? You talk about the impact, again, fair tournaments, that is foundational to esports. That's huge impact. That is the backbone of the entire industry. And then growing the esports community, right? You talk about the Minerva anti-toxicity engine, creating a welcoming environment, allowing new players to come in and feel like they can be part of this broader community. That's huge impact. And then, of course, game development. Again, this is on a small and really large scale as well. So if you look at a lot of top esports today, they started as mods. One or a small team of people had this idea. They had this platform in another game to build off of. And, this is driving, I think Counter-Strike is an excellent example of this. And obviously the game has evolved and now it has its own studio that's part of Valve. But, it started as a mod. So all it takes is really that idea and the kind of knowledge and the passion to go for it, and you can have a giant impact on the industry. Gameplay, right? You talk about, why are people competing? Why do people like games? It's that feeling of picking up the controller or mouse or keyboard or whatever interface it might be, and just falling in love with the gameplay. So anything that kind of drives innovation there, and helps increase the gameplay value for games, it's going to have a massive impact. And then outside of gameplay, there are also features like observer mode that are driving a huge impact. How are you going to watch and observe a sport if you don't have kind of an interface and tool to do that? So in terms of impact, we're seeing constant disruption in the gaming space from new games and genres that come out. And again, a lot of this is driven by very small teams and even individuals. For more established franchises that are kind of more service-based games, you're seeing continued update and features and new gameplay additions that are being made to service those dedicated fans. And then in terms of features, I talked about with Observer or even stats APIs, things like that totally changes the ecosystem. That lets people get more involved in the community. That helps grow the overall pie, if you will, for who can be involved in esports. So that's a huge part of it. Next person I want to introduce you to is Nick Harrison. So lucky enough to call this guy a friend. He's an amazing engineer at 343. He is the senior multiplayer engineer specifically. He went to school at Texas A&M for computer engineering. And he minored in mathematics, Spanish, and ancient history. First engineering job, he was an intern on Windows Phone in 2012 at Microsoft. Favorite esport is Halo Infinite. I did not pay him to write that, I promise. What in your role are you most passionate about? He says, more than anything, I'm passionate about Halo as a franchise. Best part of my role is how close I am to the gameplay and being able to shape experiences for players, myself included. Favorite food there is al pastor tacos. So Nick obviously and his team work on a lot of different things, but one of the things he wanted to call out was mode scripting. So he says, I worked as the effective lead engineer in charge of reviewing and signing off on game mode scripts for Halo Infinite, and drove relentlessly high quality bar for shipping scripts in the multiplayer space, as well as personally writing and rewriting a majority chunk of game code script that we ended up shipping for all of our Arena and BT me modes in Halo Infinite. My own deep personal interest in competitive Halo as a player informed my engineering approach, and one of the fundamental tenets I stuck to was ensuring the utmost competitive integrity in all of our game modes. So again, this is like foundational stuff. You talk about the modes that actually players are playing in Halo Infinite or any of the games that are being competed on for esports. This team's work was absolutely fundamental to anything that comes after it in terms of esports. So again, Nick's passion here, his love for esports, his love for the Halo franchise, led him to 343 and kind of excel in delivering an awesome product for fans and players. So my message to any engineers and all of you in the audience who are excited about esports and games, my message to you is greatness awaits you. Esports, again, is a new and bustling industry. You can get your hands dirty at any point. You don't have to be like in the original point that I made in one of those 6 buckets. You don't need to be the owner of a company. You don't need to be a big Twitch streamer to start having an impact. In terms of just some thought starters on how you might be able to get involved, I would say start with some of your games, your favorite games esports communities. So, look on Reddit, look on Discord, Twitter, wherever it might be. Get involved in your community, even locally in your own region. Talk to the players there, talk to the fans, see how you might be able to think about what are the kind of challenges or opportunities really that this community faces that you could potentially help out with. One example that comes to mind is this guy Shane in Halo community. He runs this website called HaloDataHive.com. There are a lot of scrimmages going on in Halo, and he was just like, who's winning these scrimmages? Like, how are the players performing? When they change rosters, what's the impact there? So he built this entire website using the Halo 5 API, and he runs it now off of Halo Infinite. And now he tracks and he provides this service for the whole community. And this is just something he does, as a side project. Like, he's passionate about esports and gaming and Halo, and he took it upon himself with his skills to start driving a real impact. Next, I would say, is there a company on a mission that you're already passionate about? So think about, for Halo, right? I didn't have the idea of like, I want to create my own indie game or anything like that. I was like, Halo is the game that I want to be a part of, and there was a company there that I strove to be part of to help, build Halo and work on Halo. So, think about it. Is there a game that you're really passionate about, and that doesn't have to be, big franchise like Halo? It can also be kind of small indie group or whatever it might be. Again, like, gaming and esports is so wide and diverse. There are different touch points to get in. And then if you're a fan of a game or an esport in particular, think about for yourself, are there problems that you see that you think, software could provide a solution for, again, maybe it's your local community, maybe it's just your friend group, right? There are ways that you can jump in and potentially find good solutions for in esports to help kind of get started. And that's the end. So I just want to say again, thank you for having me out here. And yeah, engineering, I think, is kind of one of the least talked about things in esports. I just want to shed a bit more light on these amazing people and the amazing potential that I think this field holds in esports. So thank you.
Thank you, Tashi, for the amazing talk. I want to know if anyone has any questions. Feel free to ask. While people are thinking about questions, I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food?
Since you were talking about everyone else's.
That's a good question. So I'm Albanian. My parents are from former Yugoslavia, and so a lot of the food that they cooked with was very like dough-based. It's like flour. They come from like this really like small village, and the food is called pite. So the way my mom she makes the best one. I can't make it like she does, but basically you like take this dough and you flatten it out into these really thin sheets, and then you have different ingredients that you could put in. My favorite is spinach, and then you roll it up into these long strings and you twirl it inside a pan, and then you bake it, and it's just scrumptious. So that's my favorite.
All right, fair enough. If anyone has any questions, please raise your hands. Oh, back there.
Hi again. Do you believe the esports tournaments can become more famous than the real sports? Real sports, can still grow so much in the future and have such high ceiling in terms of, I don't even know, in terms of how big they can still go from what they are right now?
I think the answer is yes, and we're already seeing that. If you look at let's just take League of Legends, for example, right? They're selling out stadiums with tens of thousands of fans. And sure, you could look at the highest of traditional sports and the highest of esports, and maybe esports just comes below that, but there are a lot of traditional sports that League of Legends esports is bigger than, and selling out bigger stadiums and getting more online viewership than, and on a global scale. So I think it's already happening. I think it's going to continue to happen. And I think the reality is people playing games, leveraging the internet, you're just opening the funnel way more than traditional sports can. So yeah, I think this is really just the beginning, honestly.
Question over here.
Hey Tashi, how you doing?
Hey,
we'll
Marty.
have to meet each other at some point. Hey, so you had a really good point about the observer mode. And I got to tell you that we were talking about this back on Halo 2, pre-Halo 2 release day. So I remember talking to Sundance Giovanni, if you know who he is. Okay. And my big cool idea was that we should, because we already had, in the engine, we had things like saved films, even though we didn't ship it with Halo 2. We had saved films, and we had observer cameras that we could use when we were testing the game. And so I thought it would be cool, especially in multiplayer, to put some static cameras around the map at strategic points that could at least tilt and pan and zoom, and then have a couple of flying cameras that could follow players, like the cool cameras in football games, right? That can do all sorts of stuff. And of course, I was shot down because it was hard enough just to get a steady frame rate with 8 players.
And just shipping the game.
Yeah. So I was just wondering how that is, because I've never seen it in any game, especially shooters, where observer mode is robust enough to be able to be real time, as robust as real time televised sports. But it seems to me like that would break into the broadcast realm, because you could have a live director, having cameras being live and really showing the audience what's happening in a match. And do you still find that the engineering problem of frame rate issues and having those extra cameras in the engine just wreck the game so they can't do it? Or do you think there's some progress being made there?
Well, great question. And yeah, just thank you, Marty, for all your work on Halo. So yeah, awesome to connect with you this way. And actually, it's funny you brought up all of those old kind of designs, because I remember at the studio just poring over those design docs and even looking at the old code there that was left from Halo 2. So yeah, the good news is there's been a lot of headway made in there. And specifically for Halo, the hardware is to a point for the new Xbox and PC that you can have up to, I think in Halo Infinite, you could have over a dozen observers in the game and position them in different locations. So just like your idea of having static cameras and kind of flyover ones. So we do that today in the Halo broadcast to provide those really cool dynamic angles. I think what's interesting to think about, and this is for more the designers to think about how they solve, is every game is different, right? You have some games that have kind of a top-down view of all the gameplay, and that kind of feels more like traditional sports, if you imagine basketball, for example. But for first-person shooter, the way your audience and your players connect is directly in the line of sight that the players are seeing. So it presents different challenges and different opportunities really for how to broadcast all those things. So yeah, I think there's definitely more to come there. And what's exciting to me personally is esports is just becoming a bigger thing in game development. And I think we'll start to see more of those innovations driven from a studio level rather than the community trying to go in, because they don't always have the ability to work on the observer mode the same way. So as esports grows, you have more people coming up who are passionate about esports or joining game development studios like Nick Harrison, for example. I think you'll continue to see more innovation there.
All right. That's it for questions for today. But if you have any more questions for Tashi, he'll be outside on the showcase. Again, a big round of applause for Tashi.
Thank you.